Hi everyone. My name is Chelsea Naylor. I'm the Director of Human Resources and here to talk to you about employee relations policies, including harassment. So we're going to start with the sexual harassment DVD. We're also going to be navigating through the employee relations policies through the orientation guidebook you have here. So I just want to walk you through that briefly. If you'll scroll down in the left bookmark bar to find the employee relations policies. And then there should be 2 table of contents pages. You may have to hit an arrow to drop those 2 down.
You said employees what?
Employee relations policies. So for you, yeah, hit the little arrow, I'm not sure what else to call it, and click on the first page of the table of contents. And it may be helpful for you if you hit this button right here. This middle one, yeah. Make it bigger for you. So click that little arrow right there to the left, and then click on the first page of the table of contents. Anyone else need help? So once you're on the first page of the table of contents, if you click on the harassment policy, that's going to jump you right to that policy. So you guys, as we travel from the harassment policy onto other policies, you can quickly navigate back and forth in the handbook that's in front of you. Okay? So we will get started with the video. If you need to stretch or anything during the video, feel free to get up and go to the back, and this is a lot of standing or sitting for you today.
Hi, I'm Frank Lozano. Today, we're going to talk about sexual harassment in the workplace. Now, most people know that sexual behavior is not appropriate on the job, yet it still continues to be a problem. Why is that? And what can you do about it? Well, we're going to show you 6 typical workplace scenes. We'll also hear comments from 2 experts in the field. The goal is to get a clear idea of what sexual harassment is and isn't. We think you'll see that there's a lot that you can do to help keep your workplace harassment free. So let's get started by looking at one situation that brings up several different issues.
So I'm thinking I'll turn in my expenses early to avoid the rush when everybody gets back from the conference. Whoa.
Hey, dude, move out of the way. I saw her first.
Hello, darling. Where did she come from?
She's new, that's for sure.
What department do you think?
The body department.
Some people around here need to grow up.
She comes.
Oh, where are you going, baby? Yeah, no? All right, you're lost. Hey, am I right, huh? Yeah. That's what I'm talking about.
Tighten up.
So, what is sexual harassment? Simply stated, sexual harassment is unwelcome conduct of a sexual nature. The key word here is unwelcome. Keep in mind, the person who finds the behavior unwelcome doesn't have to be directly involved.
Harassment is all about perception. It's not about intent. So it's the person who's hearing the conduct or seeing it or who's exposed to it. It's how they perceive it. It's whether or not they find that conduct welcome that's important.
Third-party harassment is actually very common. This occurs when 2 people, usually friends, have a relationship at work that involves a lot of joking around. The third party is not part of the joking around, but is someone who witnesses it, overhears it, or is frankly offended by that kind of language or that level of joking.
Third parties who weren't intended to ever hear the conduct or be exposed to the conduct can still have a claim for harassment.
Third-party complaints also happen when the victim has to witness flirtatious behavior or romantic behavior that he or she frankly finds distracting.
The conduct of a person who's an outsider, such as a vendor, supplier, consultant, even a customer, can also result in illegal harassment. The employer is responsible for taking all reasonable steps necessary to protect its employees, even from conduct by outsiders. Sometimes, as we just saw, it's obvious that the behavior is unwelcome because it's downright rude or disrespectful. Other times, it's not so clear. This next scene explores the concept of what unwelcome means. Let's take a look.
Hey,
Hey, yourself. Here, tell me what you think.
Wow, nice. I hope they appreciate it out there.
Make sure the peppers are nice and thin.
Catch you later. They're killing me with special orders tonight.
Oh, tell me about it.
It's cooking good looking.
Lots of work.
Oh, this looks good enough to eat.
Oh, no, it's not done yet. It's not done.
No, you've really outdone yourself this time.
Thanks. Oh, boy, I have a lot to do if you don't mind.
Excuse me.
Well, what do you think? We saw similar behavior from the waiter and from the chef, yet her reaction to each was quite different. Whether something is welcome or not is up to the recipient. Behavior from one person may be okay, but not from another. A compliment might be appreciated from one coworker, but from another might seem too personal. A hug or friendly touch from a friend might be just fine, but from one person, it might feel like an invasion of personal space. A comment that amuses some could actually offend others.
We do have relationships with others in the workplace. We may even touch one another sometimes at the workplace. The question is trying to give individuals who are likely to engage in that behavior a sense of when it can be a problem. And it can be a problem when you don't know what the potential reaction of the recipient is.
While some behavior is clearly inappropriate at work, sexual cartoons, crude jokes, suggestive innuendo, other things might not be so clear. If it's not obvious that the behavior is inappropriate or unwelcome, it's important to let people know when they've crossed the line. Generally, if you conduct yourself in a professional manner, it's less likely you'll have problems. Now, this next scene shows how unprofessional dress and demeanor can cause trouble in the workplace, for lots of reasons.
1900, are you kidding me? Wait, Rita, pull up that duplex you just had up there.
Girl, you are killing me today. You're too funny.
He wants to see the place on 4th Avenue. We could have seen this yesterday, but he's all, no, I don't want to see anything south of Grant.
What changed his mind?
Oh, like I'm supposed to know?
Hey.
Ooh, new listings. I've seen that place on Geneva Street. I saw it last week. They took the whole attic and turned it into a master suite that is divine. Ooh, speaking of which, how would you like to show him that place on 4th?
What's in it for me if I do?
Whoa, is it just me? Don't we have a dress code?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I see some of those outfits that she wears. I have to wonder, what was she thinking?
Hey, go back to the place on Washington, will you?
Okay.
Obviously, some people don't mind attracting sexual attention at work. But inappropriate attire or flirtatious conduct, even if appreciated by some, is likely to cause problems for others.
You want to have your employees give your customers, your clients, and the public a good impression of your company. And dresses that are too short or clothes that are too tight, things that show cleavage or that are transparent are not appropriate at work.
So it's best to save these outfits and this kind of conduct for after work. It's all part of showing consideration and respect. Now, our next story deals with the subject of workplace compliments. And while harassment is perhaps too strong a word for this, gender-based compliments can create a problem for some employees.
Hey, everyone. Hey, Alex. This is Susan, our newest associate. Hi. She's going to be working with you on the senior housing project. It's Aaron,
It's nice to meet you.
Jeffrey,
Pleasure.
Hi.
and George.
Susan, really good to meet you. I know you're gonna love it here. My, you are pretty. Alex, you old scoundrel. Where have you been hiding her?
We should move on down to the conference room.
When Alex introduced Susan to the other architects on the project, did you notice that George's comments seemed to make Susan uncomfortable? What do you think? Is it okay to compliment one another in workplace situations? Let's use common sense here. Honest and well-meaning compliments are usually not unwelcome. However, at times they can actually become a problem. In Susan's case, George went on to establish a pattern of compliments or other patronizing behavior that undermined Susan's credibility and gave the impression of favoritism to her coworkers. George focused on her appearance and gender instead of on Susan's skills or her contribution to the job. So what's the solution? Susan could talk to Alex, her boss, or someone else in the company. Or she could speak to George herself.
Tell you what, it's getting late. Let's hit it first thing in the morning.
George, one more thing.
Sure.
It's about how I'm fitting in with the team. I think some of them don't take me seriously. One reason, of course, is that I'm new here, and I don't have as much experience. But I think another reason has to do with some of the things you say to me. Don't get me wrong, you say a lot of nice things, but when you talk about how I look, it tends to undermine my credibility. It's like that's all I have to offer. And I think some of the others resent it.
Look, Susan, I had no idea I was even doing that. You'd think at my age I'd have learned that lesson a long time ago. It won't happen anymore. Friends?
Colleagues. I'll see you tomorrow.
Right, we got a lot of work to do.
Fortunately, Susan was able to handle this situation herself, and George was receptive to her concerns. Studies show that more often than not, by simply telling someone their behavior is unwelcome, they'll stop. But what do you do if some people just don't get it?
Happy birthday to you.
Well, don't be bashful. Open up your gift.
Very funny. Male enhancement pills. Ha ha ha. I've got to get back to work.
We want a full report, all right?
Yeah.
Hey, you sure in a hurry to try them out, huh?
What's bugging him? Can't he take a joke?
No, he could have at least said thank you.
I know. I am so sorry about what just happened. I mean, I had no idea that they planned on bringing that gift.
I know. I know they're just trying to liven things up around here, but sometimes they can carry things too far.
Well, I know that you've said something to them in the past, but it seems to be getting even worse. I mean, the joking around, the gutter language. And what about that mug that Mary brought in?
I don't know what more I can do. You know, I'm starting to hate to come to work some days.
Let's talk to Florence. I know that she's overloaded with this new product line right now, but she needs to know about this.
Okay, yeah.
Playful teasing and pranks often go too far and can contribute to an atmosphere where people feel uncomfortable at work. Remember, it's not about your intentions or your feelings, it's about the other person's perception of the behavior.
Watch the reactions of individuals when they're exposed to particular types of conduct. When you see somebody stop laughing or frown or get upset, it's a very good indication that the conduct's not welcome.
The standard is, could it offend a reasonable person? And if it could, and it does offend this person, then it's crossed the line.
No one should have to dread coming to work because of the harassing conduct of his or her coworkers. If someone's behavior is bothering you, say something. Talk to the harasser, your boss, human resources, or anyone else in the organization who might be able to help. And if someone complains about your behavior, stop immediately. The courts have identified two forms of illegal sexual harassment: quid pro quo, meaning this for that, and the more common hostile work environment harassment. Now, what we've just seen happen to David at his birthday party is a form of hostile work environment harassment. He's asked his coworkers to stop, and yet they've continued to involve him in their inappropriate behavior. Hostile work environment harassment has been defined by the courts as ongoing, pervasive, or severe conduct of a sexual nature that unreasonably interferes with an employee's job performance or creates a hostile, offensive, or intimidating work environment. Workplace policies that prohibit harassment are usually even more strict than the law, in that they prohibit any unwelcome behavior of a sexual nature. So even though certain conduct may not yet be ongoing, pervasive, or severe, most wise employers draw the line at any unwelcome sexual conduct. Why wait until someone is hurt, embarrassed, or humiliated? It just makes sense to stop the offensive conduct before it causes serious problems. Let's see what happens when David takes the problem to his boss.
I had no idea this was happening. I'm going to talk to Mary today personally to get her side of the story, and then I'm going to address the issue with the whole group at our weekly meeting Monday morning. Let me assure you, I take this seriously. Thank you for bringing this to my attention.
Well, we appreciate your help.
I was hoping you wouldn't tell anyone that I was the one who complained.
Well, I can't guarantee you that no one will find out because I'm going to have to take some action to address the problem. And to be fair, I'll have to talk to some of your coworkers to verify what happened. But I'll certainly do my best to be discreet. Retaliation is also against the law and against our policy. So please let me know if anyone says or does anything that makes either of you regret coming forward and reporting this problem. Now let's go over the details, okay?
People sometimes hesitate to involve their boss, thinking they can handle the problem themselves, or they worry about retaliation. But remember, retaliation is also against the law. Now, let's see how David's boss can step in and help.
Thanks you guys for coming here. I really appreciate it. It's very important that we follow the law, and under the law, it is illegal to discriminate or harass a person based upon their race, their color, religion, national origin, or sex, or any other protected characteristics such as age or disability. It is also against our policy. So please don't hesitate to tell me if someone's bothering you. My door is always open. And remember, you don't have to like the people that you work with, but I expect you to get along. And that means refraining from behavior that causes someone to feel embarrassed, uncomfortable, intimidated, or disrespected. It's all spelled out here in black and white. And if you have any questions, just come and see me. I'm always available.
One of the most common misconceptions about what sexual harassment is and is not is the belief that only women are victims of harassment and only men are harassers. The truth is, of course, that women can harass men and other women, and men can harass men.
Same-sex harassment doesn't depend on the sexual orientation of either party. It is the behavior that's important in determining whether harassment has occurred, not the gender or the orientation of the individuals who are involved. Now, we've already seen that the hostile work environment harassment can be verbal, visual, or physical, but it can also be the result of unwelcome sexual advances or romantic interest.
Hey, it's lunchtime. You go on without me. I'm gonna take lunch late today, so I can avoid you know who. For once, I just want to eat my lunch in peace.
I don't blame you. He's weird. I'll see you later, okay?
You haven't gone to lunch yet? Something's wrong.
Man does not live by bread alone.
Sure don't take no for an answer, do you?
Later.
Yeah. Here's a little poem from me to you, Tiffany.
Can't wait, Tiffany. No, this can't wait. It's Alan again. I thought you spoke to him. He follows me to lunch. He follows me to my car after work. He calls me at home. He sends me creepy emails. Here, look. Look, Tiffany, I've already told him that you're not interested. What more can I do? This really seems like something personal between the two of you that you should be able to handle. Besides, I mean, he really seems quite harmless. Jill, I need this to stop. Tiffany, you're right. You should not have to put up with this. Let's call HR right now and see if they can help us, okay? Okay.
Usually people stop their unwelcome behavior when asked, especially if a manager or supervisor talks to them. But even mild behavior can become a serious matter when it continues after a person has been asked to stop. Obviously, more serious steps must now be taken if the harassment continues. Discipline is sometimes needed in order to enforce company policy and to set an example to others. In some cases, discipline could even include termination. We've spent a lot of time looking at hostile work environment harassment. Now, let's look at the other form of illegal sexual harassment called quid pro quo. In a quid pro quo situation, someone in a position of power demands sexual favors in exchange for job benefits, such as a promotion, raise, good performance review, that kind of thing. Or the opposite, threatens a person's job and suggests that unless sexual favors are given, there will be a loss of job benefits. Quid pro quo is a very serious form of sexual harassment with serious consequences. Most people in positions of authority know better than to risk their careers doing something this foolish. Therefore, it doesn't happen as much these days. And when it does happen, quid pro quo harassment can take a very subtle form.
All right, all right, all right. Woo. They're looking good, Coach. They gonna be ready for the big game Saturday?
Bet. We're ready now.
Well, you make sure they play as a team. You know how I like team players. I thought you might be interested to know what the committee decided. You're in the top 3.
Oh my gosh. Really? I can't believe it. Head coach of the women's team. Do you think I have a chance?
Well, it all depends. You know, as athletic director, my vote carries a lot of weight. I know how closely I have to work with the head coach, you know, with all the extra hours during season and all the traveling. I mean, it's crucial that we get along well.
What are you getting at?
Well, I'm just saying it's a very important decision, one that I think you can help me make. I mean, I have to admit that I have certain reservations about recommending you. But I'll bet you could convince me if you really tried. Now, if I were you, I wouldn't let this opportunity slip away. So you give it some thought. I have to make my recommendation in 10 days.
Everything okay, Coach? Yeah, why? You sure?
Obviously, if the athletic director is actually threatening to not recommend the coach for the job unless she agrees to sexual favors, something quite serious has just happened. Serious and illegal. The consequences of this kind of behavior, conditioning a promotion on sexual favors, if proved, would likely result in the termination of the harasser. No one should have to put up with quid pro quo harassment ever. So, what is sexual harassment? Well, we know that it's unwelcome conduct of a sexual nature. The victim can be the intended recipient of the behavior, or the victim can be a third-party observer. The harasser can be a supervisor, a manager, or a coworker, or an outsider who's not even an employee. Employers must act reasonably to protect their employees from harassment, regardless of the source. Behavior crosses the line when it's not welcome, not returned, and not appreciated. Sexual behavior that offends, intimidates, humiliates, or insults is never appropriate in the workplace. And provocative dress and flirtatious conduct can cause problems too. Remember, intentions don't matter. Harassment is viewed from the victim's perspective. Hostile work environment harassment is ongoing, pervasive, or severe behavior that affects a person's ability to do his or her job or creates a hostile environment. Retaliation is also against the law. That means that people who report harassment or who participate in an investigation are protected. The most serious form of harassment, quid pro quo, happens when someone with power offers job benefits in exchange for sexual favors, or threatens the employee if the sexual overtures are rejected. So, what can you do to prevent sexual harassment in the workplace? Know what it is. Know your employer's policy. If someone complains about your behavior, stop. Don't wait for a chat with your boss, or worse. If someone's behavior is bothering you, say something. Tell the harasser. Tell a coworker who can help. Tell your manager. And don't hesitate to tell your manager's manager, or HR, or anyone else up the chain of command who can help. Remember, we all can do something to prevent sexual harassment in the workplace. By conducting ourselves in a manner that doesn't interfere with others' ability to do their jobs, and by treating others with respect, we help create a working environment that benefits everyone. It's up to you.
Okay, everyone, so what did you think about the harassment DVD? Surprised you didn't win an Oscar last night? I know it's really cheesy, and we have received some feedback that it seems outdated, but I can tell you that they still actively sell this exact DVD. All of them look pretty cheesy and somewhat outdated. What I really like about this DVD is it does go over a lot of different types of scenarios. So it's not just the severe quid pro quo situation where the athletic director was basically conditioning a raise or a promotion on sexual favors. I mean, it was all veiled, but that's, you know, a really drastic situation. Some of the more like less severe, benign situations that the video goes over include like the opening situation where you have the woman who was annoyed by her coworkers bantering back and forth, and the delivery person gets in on the joking. I mean, it doesn't really even focus on the person who's the object of the comments as much, but that's a real life situation that can easily happen. And then also the well-meaning compliment of the architect. And, you know, where have they been hiding you? You know, he calls her attractive or beautiful. He calls her something complimentary, but just inappropriate for the workplace. So it sort of kind of crosses the line. So I think those are the more kind of everyday type situations that you might encounter here that still fall under the harassment umbrella. So we are going to spend some time talking about harassment. It's something that I personally take very seriously, as is our organization, but these are the things that come across my desk that I think a lot of times can be handled earlier on in the situation before they escalate. And so I want to talk you through different ways to do that, the different types of harassment, and what to do if you are in a situation that falls under harassment. Okay, so I know you have the policy pulled up. I have my trusty binder, so I'm going to be a little slower than you all, flipping back and forth between policies. The intent of the harassment policy is to provide a work environment that's free from any type of harassment. And I like not to read too much, but I think Phyllis is so well written. The expectation, it says, management firmly believes that harassment of any kind seriously undermines the integrity of the employment relationship and respect for human dignity. And it goes on to say, we're committed to providing a work environment free from any form of harassment, paraphrasing there. But it's really true. No one should work in an environment where they don't want to come to work every day, or they don't want to go to the employee dining room because they don't want to run into somebody. That's just, we all have enough to do in our jobs. You don't have enough time or energy to deal with some of those extra things that could be detracting you from work. So this policy gives some examples of harassment: making unwelcome comments about a person's body, clothing, or personal life. So that could fall under the well-meaning compliment category. And I think this is probably something that happens more than any of the other forms here. Well-meaning compliments. Offensive or abusive physical contact, use of offensive nicknames or terms of endearment. We are in the South, And is anyone in here not from the South? Oh, just me? Okay. So I have to let you know, when you call me, not you, but like proverbial Southern people, call me baby, sugar, sweetie, honey, it just makes me a little, I don't know, this doesn't sit well with me. Not because I think you're trying to hit on me or anything like that, but it just, no one's ever called, I'm not used to it, okay? Conversely, I'm from the Midwest, I call a collective group of people guys. So I'm gonna walk into a room, I probably did today, hey guys, how are you? That may not sit well with you. So there are different things, but terms of endearment specifically, the baby, sugar, sweetie, that's more common in the South. We are in the South. A lot of our residents are from the South, some of them are not. So we talk a lot about, addressing residents, formally until they invite you to address them otherwise by their name. I can't sit here and say that I've never heard terms of endearment used, because that would be not true. But our policy does include, the use of terms of endearment. So if you have specific questions, especially if you're giving direct care, you're giving a very, personal service to your residents, and you hear them used throughout, your floor, please talk to your unit manager or supervisor if you have specific questions about that. But generally, just be aware that that's a kind of a sticking point for some people. Any suggestion that any of the following would affect an employee's job promotion, performance evaluation, or working conditions, then it lists all of the protected classes. Displaying offensive objects or pictures, that does include on your personal cell phone, showing it to other people. And then other conduct, even if not objectionable to some, creates a working environment that may be considered by others to be offensive, hostile, or intimidating. So going back to the video, they were talking about, if a reasonable person finds it offensive, you don't even have to be the subject of the comment. So that's the woman who was sitting at her desk trying to work and the guys were bantering behind her. She could still have a claim for harassment even though she wasn't the subject of, or the object of the comment, right? So just be aware that basically at work, you should keep the joking and the comments don't let it cross those professional boundaries. As the video said, it's like, I know you've already seen the video, but everything I say kind of goes hand in hand with the video. That's really, it's a slippery slope. You spend a lot of time with your coworkers here, you build friendships with them, joking goes too far. Next thing you know, somebody's saying something that makes you feel uncomfortable, but you feel almost partially responsible because you've been part of the joking up until that point. It doesn't matter if you've been part of the joking up until that point. When it crosses the line, it crosses the line. So I have had things escalate and not be addressed early on because people felt partially responsible for the situation. So just know that it doesn't matter if you were part of the joking or not, that doesn't matter. It's still not, it's just a line that's crossed, okay? Sexual harassment. The video does a pretty good job of going over all the different types of sexual harassment, so I won't go over those. But just want to reiterate that even if the behavior is not deliberate, it could still be perceived as sexual. Okay, company responsibility. When an employee reports harassment, it's our obligation to take it seriously and to do an investigation. So we'll investigate the report. That may require talking to multiple parties, witnesses who may have overheard it, gathering evidence, and then we'll take appropriate action. When we talk about appropriate action, we're looking at how severe was the action, is this pervasive, or is it the first time that this person's acted this way, to our knowledge at work, and take all that into consideration before handling the situation. Unfortunately, as an employee, whether or not you're the person who reported the behavior or if you're part of investigation, we can't follow up with you and let you know, okay, well, we gave John, a verbal warning, or, we're going to fire John. We can't let you know. Just know that we do handle the situation, we handle it, we take it very seriously, and we do handle it. So if the behavior continues, then it's important for you to let us know. A lot of times employees will come to me in frustration and say, I already told my manager, but they've not done anything about it because, XYZ is still happening. Well, come to find out, the manager did address it in the way they thought was most appropriate, but the way they addressed it didn't send a strong enough message to the employee, and they continued the behavior. So we just need to know if it continues so we can address it in a different way moving forward. As an employee, it's your responsibility to report harassing behavior. So even if you are the third party who overheard and you weren't technically part of the conversation, in order for us to create a work environment that's free from harassment, you've got to report it when it's going on for us to do something about it. If you don't tell us, we don't know what's going on, okay? So you're encouraged to speak to the person directly if you feel comfortable doing so, but in addition to that, you also need to tell a manager or supervisor. Why do you think that would be, that you'd also have to tell a manager or supervisor?
It's really important to tell that to the supervisor so that they can be able to have immediate action to that matter.
So there can be immediate action. But what if you said, Chelsea, I've handled it. I said something to the person, but I just want you to know XYZ happened. So you may be telling me, don't do anything. But that's true. But for us, it's also super important to know when behavior's going on, so we can keep an eye out just to be aware, even though you'd be shocked to know people generally don't say things that are inappropriate in front of like the director of HR or their boss. It's usually not when we're around. But it's important for me to know, because what you may not know, but what if I've had 3 other issues of a similar nature with that same person? I'm going to handle it differently. And I may say, well, thank you so much. I'm glad you said something, but so it's just really important for us to know. I know a lot of people feel comfortable saying something to the person directly, and they feel like it's almost less awkward if they say something directly. And I think that's great. A lot of people are super uncomfortable about it, so unfortunately what happens is they don't end up saying anything. They don't want to make a big deal about it, so they don't tell anybody, and then it goes on and on to the point where they don't want to come to work anymore, or it becomes a huge issue where it may not have been if we had just addressed it earlier on. I do stand by my earlier statement that the majority of things you're going to come across here are well-meaning. So a well-meaning compliment or other behavior that's maybe a cultural difference, or I'm not sure, just something that's it's not someone that's purposely trying to make you feel uncomfortable. They're just maybe from a different area and have a different vernacular, or there could be a generational difference. You're going to be working with lots of different generations and cultures here, not just with our employee population, but also with the residents, their family members. So there's a lot of opportunity for miscommunications and other things to happen. So what do you think happens if, it's one thing if it's an employee, right? Everyone's supposed to abide by the employee handbook. What if it's a resident?
It's just that also I experienced also a situation like that when I was working in Israel, that it's a residence, but you can be, as a nursing aide, you can be able to talk to the residents in a nice way, that you can tell her that Mr. Jones, I'm so sorry, I don't like the behavior that you're telling me or the way how you treat me. Maybe you can be able to stop it. I really like you a lot, but it's just only a purely business, and I don't mix with anything. So can you be able to stop it, and so that everything will gonna be okay? So you have to address him directly, but if he didn't stop, maybe it's about time that you can be able to contact another person who is she can help you in that matter.
I do suggest, and it's a sticky situation with a resident, especially for some of our cognitively impaired residents, but definitely, if you feel comfortable, obviously stopping the situation from escalating, but definitely tell your supervisor. And typically what we do with a resident or a resident family member is work through the social worker. So with an employee, they work through the director of HR, through a resident or their family, we'd work through the social worker. So it's a little different, but we still handle it, and it doesn't mean that you can be treated any kind of way just because it's a resident or just because they have cognitive impairment. Okay, same thing with all the delivery people. We have the same delivery people that come here, and a lot of contractors that have worked here for years. So long that you would just think they're an employee, but they don't sign off on our employee relations policies and our handbook. So for that, we would go through the project manager, Tom Henning, or Ken Miller, the manager of engineering and life safety. I actually personally had a situation with a contractor who's making me feel super uncomfortable with well-meaning compliments. And it got to the point where I was just like avoiding him in the employee dining room. And I thought, Chelsea, what is wrong with you? Every other week you come to a new employee orientation and you tell people, handle it right away. Don't wait till it gets to the point where you don't want to come to work anymore. And here I was avoiding going to the employee dining room. So that day I had that wake-up call to myself and said something to the person. He was mortified. And I also said something to Ken Miller because it was a third-party contractor. I said, Ken, I don't think it's going to be an issue, but just want you to know this is going on. Finally got up the nerve to say something today. It was super uncomfortable, but I don't think it's going to be a problem. It was never a problem, but I should have handled it way earlier. So, and I tell you that it's embarrassing to say that because I waited so long. But I just thought, he's being nice. It's fine. But then I thought also, what if he's saying that to other employees and making them feel uncomfortable, you know? So also think about it from that perspective. If they're saying it to you, who else are they saying it to? So talked about speaking to the person. If you feel comfortable reporting the conduct, you know, you can report it to really anyone in management. Usually it makes more sense to report it kind of up your chain of command. So your direct supervisor or manager. What if it is your direct supervisor or manager? You can go a step above them. You can always come to HR. We also have the corporate compliance hotlines. There are lots of different ways for you to report the behavior. Just remember that if you report to the corporate compliance hotline because you want to remain anonymous, sometimes it really limits our ability to fully investigate and handle the situation. So that's always your right. And some people feel more comfortable doing that, but just know the flip side of that. We can't really follow up with you if we don't know who you are. So a part of this too is you may be asked to participate in an investigation. And it is your obligation to fully cooperate and be forthcoming and truthful. And we'll learn later that being purposely misleading or giving false information during an investigation is justification for termination, okay? Again, we take it really seriously because we can't do our job in creating a harassment-free atmosphere if you guys don't participate and give us the truth. So just like the video says, we also take retaliation really seriously. So if anyone does or says anything that makes you regret coming forward, that's retaliation. It doesn't have to take a certain form. It's that simple, okay? You just have to let us know. Any questions about the harassment policy? No? Okay. Go back to the first page of the table of contents for me, and we're gonna go through a lot of the policies, but just really high level. So stop me if I'm talking too fast, if you have any questions. They're all important. You know, the manager, you're gonna leave here and then go to your department specific orientation. They're gonna expect you to have a certain baseline knowledge of what the company's expectations for you are. And they're gonna go into more detail about what the department's expectations for you are. So while we can't go over all the policies, they're all super important, okay? So the appeals process, kind of just generally go in alphabetical order, make it easier. You have the right to appeal any disciplinary action that's taken. You just need to do that in writing within 7 days. Okay, so if you're given a verbal warning for something and you don't agree with it, but you think, it's just a verbal warning, I'm not gonna worry about it. Well, if we follow our progressive disciplinary process and we move from a verbal to a written to termination, and when you get to the termination, you're like, well, what I was given a verbal warning for, that's not right. I don't agree with that. It's too late by that time. You need to do it when it's timely, okay? That's why we say within 7 days. So if you feel like information wasn't taken into consideration when you were given that, or you tried to give your side and you feel like it was falling on deaf ears, then definitely exercise your right to appeal within that time frame. Attendance. You can go to that part of the policy if you want, but this is something you'll definitely go over with your own department. Basically, practicing good attendance habits is a basic expectation of employment. So we know that life happens. Your car's gonna break down, you're gonna get sick, or your child's gonna get sick, stuff happens. But we do track when you're late or when you miss a scheduled shift, just to see like if it's becoming a burden or a pattern, a habit, then that we can address it through using progressive discipline. So There are a couple instances where your manager will talk to you about it not being held against you or not being considered an occurrence. And that includes if you call out sick for something that falls under the communicable illness policy. If you have a communicable illness, we're dealing with children as young as 6 weeks of age, in our vulnerable adult population here. You may be one of those people that comes to work no matter what, and we say thanks but no thanks. If you have strep throat, you really need to stay home until you've been on antibiotics for 24 hours, just as an example. So in one of those situations, when we're saying you can't come to work, we're not going to hold that against you, but we can only do that if you have a doctor's note saying that it was a communicable illness. So there's been a little confusion about that. I just want to clarify that right out of the gate. And we do that just because we want to encourage people to stay home and rest when they do have a communicable illness. And let's actually go to that policy, the communicable disease policy. Because everything else with the attendance policy, to be honest, is going to be department specific. So if you've not worked in this type of environment before, I hadn't before working here, it was a little unusual for me that when I would call out, they may ask questions, additional questions about why I was sick. And so I'd like to give everyone a little warning about that. So for example, if you have a GI illness, they may say, okay, well, when was your last loose stool without the use of, without the use of medicine? TMI, right? Trust me, as a manager, I don't really want to know, and I know you don't really want to tell me, but we have to know because we, as managers, have a little call-out guide that tells us, it's like check the boxes. I'm not a clinician, but if one of my staff calls out with certain symptoms, I use this tool to tell me how long they need to be out, symptom-free, before they can return. So in addition to just making sure you're out the requisite amount of time so you're no longer contagious, we also have to report that. We have a central contact here. The Director of Clinical Services collects that information for the entire community, including the Child Development Center. She then reports that to the Center for Disease Control. And they keep an eye on things like how many cases of the flu does Westminster Canterbury have? That's really important because not only can we limit like intergenerational activities in the Child Development Center, but also just makes us aware of, okay, because it may seem like an isolated incident. If one person in HR has the flu, one person in Avalon, one person in the tower, but when you have 15 cases total, and we don't, by the way, of flu, but you have to look at it as a community and then take certain precautions. So there is a why behind it. And I just like to warn you because that may be unusual if you've not worked in this type of healthcare environment before. Okay, so really breeze through the attendance policy, but you'll go over that with your manager. Discipline guidelines, that's an important one. Please click on that policy. So we use a progressive disciplinary process here. Can anyone share with me what they think that means? Y'all in the front row get my full attention. Oh, yeah. Oops. So you're in...
I lost it.
You're in the employee... You want to go up to the employee relations policies? There you go, this one. Yeah. And then click that little arrow. Yeah. And then table contents. Mm-hmm. And then D for discipline guidelines.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So progress. Oh, you need help? Okay. Okay, yeah, so your bookmark bar went away. Maybe right click. So just use the, on the mouse, just right click. I'm just staring at your page. I've done this before, but it's been a long time. Let's see. Can you tell me what page you're on by any chance?
Page 12.
Does it tell you at the top, like what page?
142.
Try to click on 142, yeah, and I'll get it fixed. You click the back button. Yeah, and then just type in 142. Or actually, yeah, just type in 14. And then 2 is already there, so just click enter. There you go. We'll get the bookmark bar back up for you. It's going to be harder for you to navigate if you don't have that. So using a progressive disciplinary process basically means that it's intended to improve behavior. So if you're not meeting standards, if you're breaking policy, we're not going to have like a 3 strikes and you're out policy. It's intended to improve behavior and help you be successful here. So improve or correct behavior. So usually what that means is you would start with like a verbal warning and then get progressively more severe as you move through the progressive disciplinary process. So verbal warning, written warning, maybe a written warning with suspension, and before you get to termination. And it's really to give you opportunities to improve. Now, steps can be skipped depending on the severity of the infraction. So we're looking at the severity of your actions. That may be like the risk associated with your actions. So were you putting a child in danger? Or were you putting a resident in danger, or yourself or others? And was it willful? You know, did you just have poor decision making? It was a situation that you've never come across before and we didn't really provide you training on? Or did you know it was a policy violation and you were being, trying to cut corners? There's a huge difference there. So we look at those things when we're deciding where to start within the progressive disciplinary process. So I want to draw your attention to the list of actions that are justification for immediate termination. Because these are things that we can't give you a second chance on. And I think as I read through them, you'll agree. So resident or child abuse, harm or neglect, including verbal, physical, and/or misappropriation of resident property, and then failure to report the aforementioned. Failure to immediately report the aforementioned. Insubordination, so that's failure to follow the directive of a supervisor. Falsifying company documents or providing false information. It's a nice way of saying lying. Theft or misuse of company or resident property. Sleeping on the job. Possession of a weapon on work premises. And actually, that includes your car if it's parked on campus. So if you have a situation where we do want you to be safe when you're here, we also want you to be safe when you leave our gates. So if you have a situation where you typically carry mace, then you may want to work something out. Well, you want to work something out with security. So you can have it with you when you leave campus and feel safe when you leave our campus, okay? Threats of harm, implied or direct, to any stakeholder within the community. Failure to renew a professional license or certification, that's a requirement of a position prior to it expiring. And then gross misconduct. So gross misconduct can take a lot of different forms, but it's, a gross, willful violation of established policies with a, willful disregard for the well-being of others. If I had to make up a definition on the spot. So any questions about that? Sometimes, sometimes a situation may require that you're suspended pending investigation while we're trying to get the facts together. Generally, that's going to happen if we're concerned about residents' well-being, or it's a messy situation with a lot of people involved. If whatever you're suspended for is found to be unfounded, or if you're not guilty, then you'll be brought back with pay. Otherwise, it'll be a suspension without pay. Okay? So otherwise, this is pretty standard using a progressive disciplinary process. Any questions about this? No? Okay. On we go. Electronic and communications equipment. This policy has a sister policy, personal electronic device policy. The first one governs acceptable use for Westminster Canterbury issued devices, and then the other one talks about acceptable use for your own personal devices at work. We have a really strict cell phone policy. We don't want to see it. We don't want to hear it. The only acceptable use for you to use your personal cell phone is in the employee lounge. That's the room a couple doors back with the vending machines. And that's very different for a lot of people. A lot of us are really attached to our mobile devices. So for me, it's really important for you all to understand the why behind it. If you've worked in long-term care before, it may be normal for you. You may be used to it. But one of the first things the surveyors do when they come on campus is want to see our policy about cell phone use. They also want to see, they're going to be making visual observations about cell phone use. So if we have a policy that says we don't allow it, except for in this one room, and they see people using them, we're going to be in big trouble. Why do you think that is? It's true. Keep your focus on the residents and children. It's like from a care perspective, also from a service perspective. I've never had anyone give me good service who was looking at their phone at the same time. Yes, ma'am?
And it is also your time to work, so you have to work, not to play.
That's true. Keep you focused.
It looks bad. It looks real bad.
Yeah. I think as a society, we're sort of like getting a little out of control with our cell phone use and our attachment to our devices. So for me, it's really refreshing, and I am one of those people that's pretty attached to my phone. But it's refreshing to be here and walking down the hallway and making positive eye contact with people instead of seeing the tops of their heads because they're looking at their phone walking down the hall. So all of those are great reasons, but the surveyors are really concerned about it because it's a huge resident right violation. Basically everywhere on campus, we're in a resident's home. So let's say you're taking a picture of your coworker dressed up cute for the holiday, they have a funny headband on or something, you're taking a picture of your coworker, there's a resident in the background. You post it on social media. You may even be super positive, I love where I work because we get to dress up or whatever, but you're inadvertently, breaking, or I can't think of the right word all of a sudden, you're inadvertently, what?
You're violating her privacy.
Yeah, violating her rights. Yeah, thank you. Couldn't think of that word for some reason. And so I think most people would do it inadvertently, not purposely, but it's a real possibility if you have it in the environment. So not only does it take away from resident care, but it's a really big residents' rights violation, residents' right to privacy. Obviously, I don't think we would have employees do this here, but there have been reports of videos, inappropriate videos, embarrassing videos taken of vulnerable populations. So it could be our small children, it could be our residents, and then distributed. And so we just remove that risk from the environment by saying no cell phones. So if you have a situation where your child checks in with you when they get off the school bus, or you're waiting to hear from a loved one about, a surgery or something, talk to your manager or supervisor. Don't try to sneak your cell phone. Most of us will have numbers where we can be reached easily, but I just don't want it. I just like to explain the why behind it. Plus, there's a lot of opportunities to take pictures. We have some unique things that happen here. So we have an Independence Day parade where residents and the children from our Child Development Center will get dressed up and they'll do a little parade. That's so easy. It's so tempting to want to take a little video or a picture. I have a child in the Child Development Center, and I would not be pleased if I saw a picture or video of her online. So there's lots of opportunities for you to inadvertently violate our vulnerable population's rights. I'll leave it at that. So that's why we're so strict. We will hold you to the cell phone policy if we see it or hear it, okay? All right. Did Tiffany go over the fitness for duty policy with you guys when she went over safety? I'm not sure if she does or not, so I'm just gonna go over it if you don't mind. Fitness for duty, go click on that one for me, please. Gosh, sit down for a second, I can't find it.
Excuse me, ma'am, what page is that?
Oh, sorry, can you guys tell her what pages?
Just type in 157 or read the last one.
Thank you. Remind me when we're done and I'll find your bookmarks for you again. Because my page numbers are different. Okay, so the fitness for duty policy does go hand in hand with our other safety policies. All of you did a pre-employment drug test, and we also do quarterly random drug tests, and then we also do for-cause drug tests. So being fit for duty, not under the influence of drugs or alcohol, is really important here. And so this fitness for duty policy outlines that. Just employees must not be under the influence of any substance, even if legal, which adversely affects your ability to perform your job. You can't consume, possess, sell, or distribute, or produce any illegal drugs on Westminster Canterbury property during working hours, in a Westminster Canterbury vehicle, or while acting as a Westminster Canterbury representative. And you may not operate any Westminster Canterbury vehicle or equipment while impaired. All of those are really important. You also must tell your supervisor if you're taking prescribed or over-the-counter medication, which may affect your ability to perform your duty safely. So you get acute migraines. You never know when they're going to come up, but when you do get them, you have a medicine that makes you feel drowsy, okay? You have allergies and you take Benadryl, it makes you feel drowsy. Don't wait until you've been caught sleeping in the corner to be like, oh yeah, well I took a Benadryl. That may be why you fell asleep, but it was your obligation to tell someone in advance that you were taking a medication that made you not fit for duty, essentially. Okay, so there's a way to do that without divulging your personal health information. There's a way to do that discreetly, but and we don't even need to know what you're taking the medication for, okay? But there may be situations when you have to go home or you're not able to work because of a medication you're taking as prescribed by a physician. It's not just illegal drugs. So mention we do for-cause testing. We do have the right to test employees for alcohol and or drugs under certain conditions to determine your ability to do your job. So if you're slurring your speech and you smell of alcohol, that gives us reason to think you might be under the influence of alcohol, right? You reek of alcohol because you hit it hard the night before. That gives us reason to think you might be drunk too. So think about those things. But we're never going to pull you into a room and say, you know, here, take this breathalyzer, or you're coming with us to do a drug test. We always spend a lot of time telling you, here are our observations, here's what we reported, here's what we personally observed. Basically, here's why you're here, and here are the next steps. So just know we do take that really seriously, and that it is your obligation to report the over-the-counter or drugs if you're taking medications as prescribed by a physician that adversely affect your ability to do your job. All right, that one's an important one. Okay, go back to expectations of employees. This goes hand in hand with the code of conduct. Someone might have given us the page number. 151. 151. Bam. Oh yeah, there you go. Where were you 10 minutes ago? Thank you for your help. Yeah, the bookmark. There you go. Thank you. So expectations of employees does go hand in hand with the code of conduct. It kind of outlines just basic guidelines or expectations for behavior. This says to provide guidelines for conduct. So there is a lot of overlap in this policy, but I like to review it. It says integrity and high ethical standards are essential in our business. And it goes on to say all employees are expected to. And it says things like attend work regularly and when scheduled. Comply with our code of conduct, not work overtime unless approved, work safely and report safety concerns immediately, be fit for duty. We have policies that cover all of these things, but it's really, this is sort of like an umbrella or catch-all policy. I do like to go over the positive workplace and neighborhood expectations. Employees should treat other employees, residents, their families, visitors, suppliers, and contractors in a businesslike and professional manner, creating an atmosphere of trust and mutual respect. Each employee must refrain from any conduct that interferes with another individual's work performance or creates an intimidating, hostile, or an offensive work environment. And it says the code of conduct must be followed at all times. The second paragraph talks about our neighborhood expectations. Our positive relationship with the neighboring community is extremely important. And it says all employees have a responsibility to maintain positive relationships and represent the organization as a good neighbor through their external actions and compliance with the standards of the organization. So, for example, playing super loud music if you get here at 4 a.m. through the neighborhood, throwing your cigarettes in people's yards, parking in the neighborhood where you're not supposed to, things like that. The neighbors are very quick to call us if they have any concerns. Okay, inclement weather. All I'll say about that is that we do serve our residents every day of the year. So, and our child development center never closes either. So we just ask that you make every reasonable attempt to be here during times of inclement weather without putting yourself in danger. Leave of absence. That's the policy where you'll find information on accrual for benefit time. We do have different buckets for our benefit times. We have personal time, sick time, and vacation time. So that's where you'll find out the accrual of the benefit time and when it's appropriate to use it. You'll also find information there on what to do if you're called for jury duty. So that, again, it's called leave of absence. Okay, let's go to the second page of the table of contents. Problem resolution. We do ask that you not engage in conflict with other people, even if they're trying to draw you in, and that you use the chain of command to resolve conflicts. So if you've gone to your supervisor and you feel like nothing's happening, then either go back to your supervisor or go to their boss, their manager. You can always come to HR. We want you to feel like you're getting the adequate attention and resolution to your concerns. If you come straight to HR, the first thing we're going to say is, have you talked to your manager? Not because we don't want to help you, but because we often can create more confusion by interjecting ourselves too early into a situation. And we're also not as familiar with your specific department protocol, so it just adds confusion sometimes, inadvertently, but it does happen. Resident gift sales or other transactions with employees. Find that policy. Okay. So the intent of this policy is to protect resident property and financial assets and provide employees guidelines concerning gifts or other transactions with residents. This policy has evolved over time, but under the guidelines it says to avoid possible impropriety or the appearance of impropriety, transactions of any kind between residents and employees of Westminster Canterbury, except those conducted as part of an company-sponsored event, are strictly prohibited. So basically, you can never purchase something directly from a resident. You can never accept gifts of their personal belongings. So no transactions of any kind between residents and staff. We have, and it talks about a company-sponsored event. We have an annual fall craft fair, and sometimes residents will set up a booth. So if it's at a Westminster Canterbury sanctioned event and a resident happens to have a booth, you can buy something from them there, but that's the only exception. I can't think of any other Westminster Canterbury sponsored events like that. But so the only exception for this policy, or like the gift policy, is that you can accept non-monetary gifts of nominal value. So non-monetary, it can't be cash, check, or a gift card. Non-monetary and of nominal value, we consider nominal value to be $25 or less. Okay? So it gives examples of gifts of nominal value. fruit, candy, cookies. So if a resident or resident's family member, really anyone, gives you a gift that you think meets this criteria, non-monetary, of nominal value, then you go to your manager and get it approved. That's kind of our system of checks and balances before you take it off campus, basically. So it's really important, especially during holidays. Residents are told this as well, but sometimes they might forget or inadvertently put you in an awkward situation. But accepting a gift from a resident, especially of nominal value, is a terminable offense. So make sure that you report anything, decline gifts that are cash value, and do report a gift if you think it meets this criteria. Okay, we basically have a no solicitation policy. We have a separate policy for that, but Cliff Note version, don't solicit. We're a tobacco-free workplace. This shouldn't be the first time you're hearing that. And we also have a policy about working for residents. It doesn't come up very often, but occasionally we have somebody with a special skill set. We have one employee that plays the piano, so she might play the piano for resident parties, but she doesn't do that for work here. So it's completely separate from her day job, so she's allowed to do that. So they're kind of some weird unicorn situations that we have a policy just in case it comes up. Any questions about all of that information we just went over?